Right now, before we go any further, I want you to do something. Open your Super app or your MyGov and actually look at your balance. Go on, I'll wait. Got the number? Good. Now hold it in your head. Because here's the real question. For your age, is that enough? And be honest with yourself for a second. You're not really sure, are you? Most Australians have no idea what they should have by now. So they never check, and the years quietly tick by. Well, tonight, we fix that. We're going to look at the typical super balance for Australians at 30, 40, 50, and 60, and the balance you'd actually need to be on track for a comfortable retirement. Then you can hold your number up against both and finally know where you really stand. I'll warn you now. For most people, there's a gap, and it's bigger than you'd think. But stay with me, because being behind is not the same as being stuck. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to catch up from wherever you are. There's also a brand new super rule that just started this month, quietly working in your favor. Most Australians have no idea it even exists. So grab a cuppa, keep that balance in mind, and let's have the honest conversation nobody else will. First, we need to sort out one thing, or none of these numbers will make sense. There are actually 3 different should-have figures, and people mix them up constantly. The first is the average, and the average is misleading, because a small number of people with enormous balances drag the average way up. So the average makes almost everyone feel like they're failing. Ignore it. The second, and the honest one, is the median. The median is simply the middle. Line every Australian your age up by their super, and the median is the person standing right in the middle. Half have more, half have less. That's your true peer benchmark. The third figure is the target, what you'd need to be on track for a comfortable retirement. So through this whole video, we'll look at 2 numbers together, what people your age typically have, and what being on track actually looks like. Deal? Good. Let's find your age. Let's start at 30. At 30, the typical Australian has a median super balance of around $40,000. 40,000. That's the real middle of the pack number. Now, to be comfortably on track at 30, you'd want to be closer to the mid-double digits, somewhere in the region of $50,000 to $60,000, depending on your income. So the typical 30-year-old is a little behind the ideal, but not by a frightening amount. And here's the good news at 30. Time is entirely on your side. You have around 35 years of compounding ahead of you. A small gap now is the easiest gap you will ever have to close. This is the cheapest, most powerful moment to act. Please don't waste it. Even an extra $50 a month at 30 can become tens of thousands by the time you finish. That's the quiet magic of starting young. Small now becomes enormous later. Now let's jump to 40. At 40, the typical median balance climbs to around $100,000. 6 figures. It sounds reassuring. But here's where the gap starts to open up. To be genuinely on track at 40, you'd really want somewhere around $150,000 to $200,000 behind you. So the typical 40-year-old is now meaningfully behind the target, often by $50,000 or more. Why does the gap widen so much in your 40s? Because this is the decade of mortgages, kids, and single incomes while someone raises them. Contributions quietly stall, right when compounding needs them most. The 40s are where good intentions go to die. But there is still real time to fix this. Next, 50. At 50, the typical median super balance is around $160,000. And to be on track for a comfortable retirement, you'd want to be closer to 300 and ideally beyond it. So by 50, the gap for many Australians is very real. We're talking 6 figures of daylight. Now, this is the moment people either panic or they get serious. And the 50s are genuinely your last decade of heavy lifting. The good news? Your income is often at its peak, and the mortgage may be shrinking. So this can be the decade you close an enormous amount of ground if you decide to. And finally, 60. At 60, the typical median balance sits at around $200,000. And the comfortable target is $630,000 for a single person. Read those 2 numbers again. 200,000 against 630. The typical 60-year-old has only about a third of the comfortable target in super. Now, if that number just made your stomach drop, take a breath. Because context matters enormously here. And that context is the single most important part of this whole video. Here's the truth almost nobody explains properly. Most Australians are behind on super alone. And that is actually by design. Because super was never meant to fund your entire retirement on its own. It was built to work alongside the age pension. For most retirees, the pension tops up that super gap month after month for life. So that scary 200,000 at 60 isn't the whole story. It's just one half of a team. It's still absolutely worth closing the gap. More super means more freedom and less reliance on the pension. But you are not failing. The system was designed this way. I made a whole separate video on exactly how much you need to retire and how the pension fills the gap. Watch that one next. It'll turn that stomach drop into a plan. Now, before we talk catch-up, we need to talk about the gender super gap. Because it's real and it's structural. Across all ages, Australian women retire with roughly 19% less super than men. And in the mid-40s, that gap peaks at close to 28%. This isn't about choices or effort. It's built into the system. Super is paid as a percentage of income. So career breaks to raise children, more part-time work, and historically lower pay all translate directly into less super through no fault of the person. If this is you, it is not a personal failing. It's a design flaw you can plan around. And several of the catch-up moves we're about to cover were made for exactly this situation. Now here's that brand new rule I promised you. And it just started this month. It's called Payday Super. For decades, your employer only had to pay your super 4 times a year, once a quarter. As of the 1st of July this year, that's changed completely. Now, your super has to be paid at the same time as your wages, every single payday. And it has to land in your fund within a few business days. So why does this quietly matter so much for you? 2 big reasons. First, your money now starts compounding sooner, every single pay. Over a career, landing that money earlier adds up to a real difference at retirement. And second, this one is huge. It makes underpaid super far easier to catch. Billions of dollars in super went unpaid every year under the old quarterly system. Now, if your super doesn't show up on payday, you'll spot it almost immediately. So here's your action item tonight. Log in and check your super is actually landing each pay. All right? You know where you stand. Now let's talk about closing the gap. Because this is where behind turns into back on track. Lever 1. Find your lost super. Australians have billions of dollars sitting in forgotten duplicate accounts. Jump onto the ATO through your MyGov and consolidate it into one fund. It takes minutes. Lever 2. Check the fees and the investment option you're actually in. A high-fee fund or a too conservative option when you're young can quietly cost you a fortune. Lever 3. Salary sacrifice, even a little. Putting a bit extra in from your pre-tax pay is taxed lightly and it compounds for decades. Lever 4. Use the carry-forward rule. If you haven't used your full contribution caps in recent years, you may be able to catch up in a lump. Lever 5. If you have a partner, look at spouse contributions and the government co-contribution. These are designed to help lower-income and single-income households close the gap. None of these require you to be rich. They just require you to start. So let's bring it all together. At 30, the typical Aussie has around 40,000. At 40, around 100,000. At 50, around 160,000. At 60, around 200,000. And most people are behind the comfortable target. That's the uncomfortable truth. But here's the honest, hopeful other half of that truth. The age pension is built to top up the gap. A brand new rule is now protecting your super every payday. And you have more catch-up tools than any generation before you. Being behind on super is incredibly common. It is not a life sentence. Almost everyone watching this is behind on something. you are in very good company. The difference between the people who retire comfortably and the people who don't usually isn't income. It's simply who decided to pay attention and when. The worst thing you can do is what you've maybe been doing, which is not looking. So look, check your balance tonight. Find your lost super. Nudge your contributions up. Because the best day to fix your super was 10 years ago. And the second best day is today. If this gave you a clearer picture and a bit of a wake-up call, do me a favor and subscribe. We break down the real Australian money numbers, one honest video at a time. No hype, no nonsense. And if that gap at 60 scared you, go watch my video on how much you really need to retire. It shows exactly how the pension fills it in. Your plan doesn't start one day. It starts today. Quick reminder before you go. This is general information only, not personal financial advice. These are typical figures and current rules, and both change over time and by your situation. So check your own balance, check the latest ATO guidance, and make the plan your own.